Joining us today for our open house focusing on our kindergarten program. We really appreciate your interest in our school community, and we're excited to share with you what we're calling small moments of teaching and learning today. Our hope is that our values come through in these small stories shared by our faculty and families, and by what our children tell us that they love about Giddens School. So we really appreciate you being here. And to begin, I'm now going to introduce you to Marva McDonald, who is our head of school. Marva, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I always think this is a really special moment when we get to the opportunity actually to talk to prospective families about the school. And our goal is to really give you a window into the work that we do with kids. As a little bit of a window, I woke up this morning to this really great video that the kindergarten kids have put together about the food drive, the annual food drive. And it's so charming and also so caring about what they're trying to do. They're trying to convince the rest of the kids in the school to participate in the food drive. And there's this moment where a kid is talking about perishable goods and non-perishable goods and what can fit into the food drive can. And for me, it's just one of those things about Giddens where even at the age of 5, we're really trying to help kids build a connection between who they are and what they can do and what the needs are of the broader community around them. And so that's kind of a central theme of the school. I'm going to talk for just a little bit of time about what I think is really unique about the school and why I think it's different in some ways than other kinds of schools you might be thinking about and engaging in. And the fundamental core of Giddens is really about the ways in which we connect 3 areas. It's the way that we connect academics and academic content learning to kids' social emotional development, all framed inside of notions and issues related to justice. So when we think about academic learning, we care actually a great deal that your kids are building the conceptual understanding and the practical skills in mathematics and science and literacy and in social studies. We want them to think like scientists, to think like mathematicians, to become writers, right? And to become historians. That's our goal for children. And inside of all that content work, we also want them to develop an understanding of who they are as learners. What are their strengths? Where are they still progressing? When do they need help? How do they ask for help? And who do they ask for help, right? That they look around in the world and what they begin to notice is that their peers and their teachers, right, can support them on their own trajectory. So that when they're going to middle school, which seems like a really long ways off for some of you, right, that they have the capacity to step back and say, oh, I actually need support in this moment related to my academic learning. So it's not just the learning of the content, it's helping them understand how they are and who they are as learners. That all sits next to and is really integrated with the ways in which we engage kids' social and emotional development. We actually know that a kid's understanding of themselves, their emotional sensibilities, right, is actually very connected to who they become and what they can learn academically. Those 2 things are not separated. And we want kids to develop and have the time to develop and the support to develop their relationships with their peers. How do they negotiate conflict? How do they celebrate, right? How do they reach out when they need support? And how do they advocate and support somebody else? And those are really fundamental skills that are kind of embedded in both supporting kids socially and also supporting them emotionally. Those connections, right, are so strong at Giddens, in part because Giddens started as an early childhood institution, right? So we've never kind of strayed from really believing deeply that social emotional learning is central. That's even more important, I would say, as we kind of come out of COVID, right? Where what we see are kids have had less practice at how to manage their relationships, how to negotiate. They haven't spent a lot of time, for example, like going to the zoo or being on a soccer team. All of that practice now sits at school. And a lot of that is about the way that they engage with each other and how they engage with themselves. The work of academics and content and the work and learning of social emotional learning at Giddens sits inside of kind of our framework around justice. We want to help kids develop their moral compass, right? Their understanding of what's right in the world. How do they connect to those issues when they see something that they think isn't actually the way it should be? Do they feel any sense of agency? Do they have agency to make changes? We think of that as both the work of justice, right? And in a big way, helping them understand the big structures. So like as they develop through Giddens, they start to think about, I noticed in Seattle, for example, that the city is kind of segregated by race. Why is that, right? That's a really important question for kids in this community to understand and to think about. They're not thinking about that quite yet at 5, right? But we're building their ability to ask a question like that and engage in a question like that. We're also helping them think about, oh, I noticed that some people who are in our neighborhood are living on the street or living in houses that don't look like mine. Like, what is that about, right? And those are really important questions of justice. Justice is also about our everyday interactions with people who are the same and different from us. What do I notice about somebody, right? How do I support them? What's their experience of the world like? And how do I engage with them? And I sometimes talk about it as the big J for justice and the little J for justice. So what makes Giddens unique is that those 3 things, the academic work, the social emotional learning work, and the work around justice, are not pieces of a pie. They're an integrated whole, all with the goal of seeing and understanding your kid in a holistic way. Your kid actually cares about all of those things, and we want to see them right through that lens and support them. And I think what you'll hear today actually is how amazing it is through all of the adults in the school, how much they notice and understand about each individual child and each individual child's relationship, right, to what makes Giddens unique. So thank you for coming. We're looking forward to hearing from everybody and then coming back a little bit at the end to answer any questions that you all have.
Thank you, Marva. I'm now going to pass to Brenda Cram, who is our Associate Head of School. Brenda, welcome.
Thanks, Ken. Oh, I'm super excited to talk to you today. Thanks for coming, everyone. One of the things that I will tell you about is just my role at the school, and I could not have a better job. I get to work with the teachers around enhancing the school's climate and culture and supporting our mission and values by providing professional development and talking about students and partnering with the teachers around their needs with regard to each one of the students' individual academic, social, emotional, and social justice needs as well. And I'm going to share a story with you, a small moment that happened last year in the kindergarten classroom. And it really gets to what Marva was talking about with regard to the small J, in that in this classroom, it was one of 2 kindergarten classrooms last year. And there was a student who was a little frustrated because he'd been working really, really hard on some of his writing. And he was communicating with other students and reading what he'd written. And the mask situation was making it challenging for the others to understand him. In addition to the fact that speech was challenging in general for this student. And another student came over and said, as the child was getting frustrated, he was starting to jump up and down and, really shake his fists because he was really frustrated, but he wasn't hurting anyone. He was just showing his frustration. This other student came over and said, it helps me when I'm feeling upset to do a 5-finger breathing activity. And that was to breathe in on the way up and breathe out on the way down, and explain the whole thing. And then the other child practiced and did the activity and breathed in on the way up and out on the way down, all the way through his hand, the 5 fingers. And when he got done, he said, "That didn't help me. I have different needs." And I thought, This is exactly it, though. This is understanding needs and wants. And for this other child, he was trying to be helpful, trying to see the needs, trying to strategize and help. And the best solution he could come up with was the 5-finger breathing activity. It wasn't the right activity, but it was worth an effort. And so a little bit later, only a couple of minutes later, I watched that child walk over to the other child and say, I just wanted to say thank you. It didn't help me, but I felt good that you came over and talked to me. That's what the school's about. Finding those moments. And those moments are taught. They're taught by the teachers. They're taught over and over in different situations that will arise, so that in those particular times when you can be an ally or you can be a friend, the students take those opportunities to step up. That's why I love my job, because I get to work with those incredible educators who are looking for the ways in which they can enrich the opportunities for these students. So thanks for coming today. I'm really glad you're here.
Thanks so much, Brenda. I'm now going to introduce you to Portia, who is one of our kindergarten teachers. So Portia, welcome.
Hello. So many small moments happen in kindergarten because I feel like everything happens in kindergarten. But my small moment happened recently as well, just last year when we started the school year with half the time in remote and half the time in person. But then in the fall, we got hit with smoke days. And so there were some weeks where we were on remote learning for the whole week. And so one Thursday or Friday, I noticed that the kids were starting to lose their steam, and we're on Zoom synchronously for 5 to 6 times a day, 20-minute or so sessions, but still they were starting to lose their steam, and the smoke was terrible. So my eyes were, really scratchy. So I put my glasses on, which I'd never wear, and showed up early morning on our morning meeting with my glasses on. And I said that Portia's not here today, but Portia's twin sister, Morsha, is going to teach a day. And the kids just started cracking up and was trying to convince me that I am in fact Portia. And lots of things showed up in that little moment where we had a self-portrait activity just a few days before that. And so they were describing Portia and saying, no, you're Portia because your eyes are shaped like almonds, slivers of almonds. You have little tiny brown freckles on your nose. Like, you're Portia, you're just wearing glasses. So they're all like telling me all my attributes, describing my features, convincing me that I still sound like Portia. And that happened all day up to the last morning or the last class meeting that we had. They were convincing me using persuasive language. They were arguing, and it just, showed how, we are given this flexibility around how we teach our classrooms. And, we were able to, adjust and be flexible. The kids showed resilience and also some flexibility. They really persevered. They were doing it till the end of the day, and it made it fun. And so finding that emergent moment to like change things up, to make sure that the kids are still with us, and also made the whole day fun and gave us enough energy to get back to remote learning the following week. So that topic lasted for like a couple of weeks. So that's mine. That's all.
Thanks so much, Portia. I'm now going to introduce Hiromi, who is another one of our kindergarten teachers. Hiromi, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I have a short story to share about what happened for me just a few days ago. And it was during closing circle. And this is when we come together as a class and we reflect on a social emotional or social justice question. So in class, since the beginning of the school year, we've been mindful of being kind and thankful. And with Thanksgiving around the corner, while not everyone celebrates it, and we, accepted that, we're all thankful for something and someone. So I asked the class what or who they're thankful for, and they're all kind of thinking. And after a little while, some quiet thumbs go up, and friends share that they're thankful for their game or device, their neighbor friend, and of course, friends in class. And, those thumbs are kind of stopping, and I'm just waiting to see if any other friends want to share. So then I see another quiet thumb go up, and it's actually a friend who had a pretty tricky day. She was having a few meltdowns. So I was really happy to see her thumb go up. And when I called on her, she said, and this is an actual quote because it was just so impactful for me, "I'm thankful for the school because I like coming to school, seeing my friends and learning. Without the school, I won't have any fun." So that was a big, I know it's a small moment, but it was a big moment for me and for the whole class.
Thank you so much, Hiromi. I'd like to introduce to you Nicole, who is another one of our kindergarten teachers. So Nicole, welcome.
Thank you. My small moment is about two kids who had a little bit of a conflict and how we resolved that. So these two students on the surface level didn't have a lot in common. One, I can call her student A, was very like hanging on every word I say, very rule focused, very, trying her best to be by the book. And the other student, student B, I can say, was having a hard time with this because some people have a hard time following expectations in kindergarten, in those first few weeks. Not anything intentional, but, people show up in different ways. And I started to notice this dynamic between them of, kind of calling each other out when they weren't following the rules, starting with that person who was a little more rule focused. And then, obviously that didn't make the other person feel good. So they started to do it back in this way that like really made me uncomfortable. And so I made this mental note of like, okay, I'm going to have to talk to these friends. I'm going to think about how I can, how I can frame this, how I can talk about it tomorrow. But I didn't get a chance because sometimes in kindergarten, those relationships can bubble up and really quickly, they can become a problem. And, it ended up with them, racing to be first in line and somebody getting hurt. And so I had to improvise and talk to them right then and there and saying, I'm not comfortable with how you guys are talking with one another. I'm noticing this, I'm noticing that. And, just started by asking them how they felt when, how does it feel to have someone, say this about you in front of the class? And, they shared their feelings. And then, I started talking about, you actually have more in common than you might think. Both of you are competitive. You both like to play in the sandbox. You both like, building things. And so I actually think it would be really great if you two played together. And I think you might find that that would help solve some of your problems. And I was planning on, okay, they're probably not going to take me up on this. I'm going to have to structure this. Maybe tomorrow I can think of a chance to put them in a group together, and I'll be there and, be watching them. But later that day, before I even had a chance, I turned around at, their free choice play, and they're building a puzzle together, which like wasn't even my suggestion. It was a different thing that was that they both have in common. So I was really happy with that, and that they were really, I could tell these two kids were really primed for accepting that kind of conflict resolution and being open to, to have that empathy building. So that's my moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
I like recess. What I like about school is I like the play stops that we have. friends because I get to play recess and I like recess because I get to play with my friends.
What do you love about Giddens?
I know PE and I like the bingo, the game in Spanish. I can make new friends.
So great. I'm going to introduce you to Sharon now, who is our literacy specialist, and we'll talk a little bit about her role at Giddens. Welcome, Sharon.
Thanks, Ken. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I am the literacy specialist at Giddens. This is my 3rd year in that position, but my 10th year at Giddens, I was also a 2-3 teacher and a 4-5 teacher. And it's funny when in this kind of situation, like when Ken is asking me to talk about my role, or just in life, when somebody asks me what I do, I now actually think of a project that this current kindergarten class did at the beginning of the year when they were thinking about community helpers. And each student drew a portrait of somebody who works in the school and then wrote a little bit about how that person helps the community. And on mine, it says, Sharon helps us with literacy, which is kind of like math, but just a tiny bit different. So there you have it. Fair enough. But actually what I mostly work with is reading and writing and letters and sounds and stories. So I also have a pretty cool job. I look at assessments that happen periodically through the year. I also just talk a lot with the classroom teachers because we're lucky enough to have small class sizes. So the teachers know their students really, really well. And they're constantly doing informal observations and assessments, thinking about what's going on in their classroom, what's going really well, what maybe isn't going so well. And so together we think about making sure that all students are getting what they need. And that might mean that some kids need a little bit of support in certain areas. And some kids might need a little bit of extension in certain areas. I then work with the teachers to either provide resources or to help them think about differentiating instruction within the classroom. And then I also work directly with students. I push into classrooms during literacy blocks and help in a variety of ways. And then I also pull students out in small groups or sometimes individually to give that kind of targeted instruction in a foundational skill. So that is what I do at Giddens, which, you know, is kind of like math.
Thanks, Sharon. I'd like to introduce you to Sarah, who is our Spark specialist, and Sarah will also talk a little bit about her role with our Spark program. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. This is my 6th year at Giddens, and like Sharon, I previously taught 2nd and 3rd grade and 4th and 5th grade before this position. So Spark is a really exciting program at Giddens School. You can see the acronym on the bottom of your screen there. So the S stands for science. The P stands for project-based, which means that instead of trying to fill children up with information, we're designing experiences where students can discover their own learning. And we really use student questions to guide a lot of what we're doing in Spark. The A stands for art. The R stands for relationships, which is where a lot of our social studies, content and concepts come from. There's also a lot of connections to social justice and anti-racist learning in Spark. And then the K is for knowledge, which we hope students will have after going through our Spark program. So students in the elementary program go through 6 units a year. Everyone at the beginning of the year was studying civics, but the kindergarten unit was on community helpers that Sharon was just talking about, thinking about how they as kindergarteners can help their class community and beyond. And then now everyone in our school is learning about earth science, but the kindergarteners are learning about weather. They're making some amazing weather reports and learning about how to prepare for the weather. After that, everyone at the school will be studying geography and economics, but the kindergarteners will be focusing on families and families around the world, learning about different family structures, trying to disrupt some of the ways this unit and also the community helpers unit are sometimes taught in problematic ways. Also in kindergarten with economics, we're really learning about wants and needs that I think Brenda also touched on earlier. After that, after winter break, we'll all at the school be focusing on history and learning from the past. And the kindergarten unit for that is stories and legends. And then after that is physical science for the whole school, and kindergarten will be focusing on simple machines and getting to do some building and designing and creating of their own. And then ending the year with life science, and kindergarten will be learning all about insects. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the time.
Thank you, Sarah.
I like to do in Spanish. Learn Spanish words. I love Black Giddens because I make really best friends, and I like playing races and tags. Playing on the playground with lots of fun toys.
Can you tell me one thing that makes this school special?
Learning.
So sweet. I am now going to introduce you to Ori, who is our music and performing arts teacher. Welcome, Ori.
Hi, Ken. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I've been at Giddens as a music teacher for 5 years now. And so I've really got to know these kids for a long time. You know, I work with every student in the school, and they stay with me even when they change grades. And I know a lot of schools talk about knowing the whole child and educating the whole child. And I want to talk to you about a story like that happened in music class about a month ago. And so these whole child moments can happen at any time. And this time, a first and second grade class was walking into my classroom, and they were talking about jobs that dads have, about their dads and anybody's dad. And they asked me what job my dad has. And I said, my dad is a lawyer. And one kid goes, yeah, your dad puts people in jail. And I was like, oh, no, my dad does not put people in jail. My dad helps families who are having a hard time. Some families who are getting a divorce or are having a hard time figuring out how to parent together. And then they were all like, yes, tell us more. And I said, well, I bet some of you know a lot about that. That might be happening with your family, or it happened before, because I knew that 2 kids in that family, in that classroom, had their parents had gone through a divorce. And one kid raised their hand, and they said, yeah, that's happening to my family right now. And what was really interesting about that is that they hadn't shared that with their class yet. It was a very new thing. No one in their class knew that was happening. And that was the moment where they were like, okay, it's time to share. And another kid whose parents had gone through divorce several years ago raised their hand, and they were like, I know a lot about this because this happened a long time ago. And I'm an expert. And these 2 kids looked at each other and they were like, okay, we understand. And, you know, I could have tried to skate on past that and been like, all right, everybody, it's time for music class. We need to learn these rhythms. But instead, I knew that this was an important pivotal moment for that class. And so we took the time and we talked a little bit about divorce and how those kids were experiencing it and what it meant for them. Because it didn't mean that there was a problem. It meant that their parents were figuring things out, right? And then they shared more with their class, and those kids played on the playground and chatted later. And it was one of those moments where I was like, yeah, these kids know each other and we know them. And it's not just about who they are at school and who they are at home being different. Like, it's the same kid all day long. And they got to share, and that really changed how they played with their friends that day. And I just thought it was really beautiful. And then we, you know, sang and learned those rhythms or whatever, but music was a little shorter that day, which was worth it. That's it.
Thank you so much, Ori. Okay, we're ready to introduce Natalie, who is our school librarian and also works as an extended day teacher. Natalie, welcome.
Hi everyone. Thank you for being here. This is my first year at Giddens, and my small moment happened on Indigenous Peoples Day this year. In library, the kindergarten class and I were reading the book We Are Water Protectors by Ojibwe author Carol Lindstrom. This book describes the heroic, strong, incredibly brave efforts of Indigenous women protesting the expansion of oil pipelines through sacred land and water. And each class was asking these incredibly insightful questions as they made sense of how oil pipelines, or how Lindstrom describes them as black snakes, pose threats to water, humans, lands, and how, this is happening in one area of the country, but this might affect other areas. And we're talking about how water moves. And after reading, I close the book and one student stands up and says, I've always wanted to be a veterinarian when I grow up, but now I'm thinking I need to reconsider because I want to be a water protector. And this was such a beautiful moment. She was so serious and so firm in this decision. And this moment stayed with me because it just really shows how impactful storytelling can be. Storytelling is not necessarily efficient. In fact, it kind of requires a childlike curiosity, as it's an unhurried expression of an event or a person. Storytelling keeps us in the here and now while simultaneously transporting us to different times and places. And storytelling summons our imagination to these brightly colored pages and events that are happening around us. And it just keeps us connected and can challenge the way that we see the world and see ourselves, like a kindergartner deciding that they want to be a water protector instead of a veterinarian. I'm grateful to be in a space with these kiddos where we get to read a wide range of authors and identities and backgrounds and know that other places exist and other people exist. It's truly a joy to watch children uncover new worlds and different parts of our world. So that's my small moment.
Thank you, Natalie.
Well, I love that there's a bunch of nice people and that they care about me and everyone else. I like the music. I really like PE, and I love the playground, especially the part where you can climb up on the rope. And I also like that you can check out books from the library.
I like snack time because that's when we get to eat, and I love to eat. I like my friends and my classroom and my teacher. I also like reading time because I love to read books.
So great. Well, I'd like to introduce you to Narissa now, who is a current parent at Giddens School. She has a kindergartner in our program. Narissa, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. My small moment was recently, this week was actually two, it's going to combine together. Mason came home, and we usually talk about not like, oh, how was your day? It's more like, oh, what did Portia read to you? What did you get from the library? What did you guys play with Bryce or in gym class? And he talked about, oh, something happened and his feelings got hurt. And then he told me, he's like, Mom, I'm going to use bug and a wish. And I totally forgot about that. And I go, what's a bug and a wish? And then he tells me, oh, you have to talk about what bugs you with how you feel. And then I wish that this person could do something else differently. And I thought, wow, that's really great. Social and emotional learning, it's a big part of kindergarten and just from, preschool on too. And I thought that was so amazing. And the other small moment was the affirmity group that we had recently. And we had, I met this parent and he told me that something happened with his child in 3rd grade. And he told me what he did to learn from his emotions and how he's going to tell his friend about how his friend hurt his feelings. And instead of going to him or charging at him, he said, I'm going to write a letter. I'm going to write a letter so he could read how I felt. And I thought, wow, that's amazing, because not only you think about it at night, you think about what you're going to write, it shows reflections, visibility, representation, and equity and inclusive in this affirmity group. And to me, that equals out to advocacy, and you learn one and you teach one. And so those are my big, small moments. I mean, there's small moments, but they're big to us in our family. So thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Narissa. I'm now going to pass to Margaret, who is another parent in our school community. She has 3 kids at Giddens School. 2 of her kiddos are in kindergarten, and she also has a 3rd grader. Margaret, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome to everyone. This is our 4th year at Giddens. So my oldest started in kindergarten, and obviously my twins are in kindergarten right now. My small moment story is about Banned Books Week, which I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with. It's sort of a nationwide week was set up by the American Library Association to sort of honor banned books. And so in kindergarten, they also have a week of learning about banned books, where they read books that are age appropriate and discuss things like race and gender and, you know, same-sex relationships that may not be allowed in other school settings. So on this Friday, after the full week, we were driving to school. It's 15 minutes. We live in Seward Park, and my kids usually fight. Let's be real. And so instead, one of the twins in the beginning of the ride brought up a book that they had read in class that week, and sort of was giving some dialogue and discussing a little bit. And then his twin brother chimed in. They're in 2 different classes about what books they had read. I didn't say anything. And effectively, my 3rd grader took over the conversation and was asking questions in this like utterly thoughtful way. Clearly things that he had been modeled since being a Giddens since kindergarten, asking Elliot, I'd love your opinion on this. And Owen, what are your thoughts about this? And it just was so sweet. And so I was just so grateful to Giddens that they were enabling my children to think about these really big and important topics in like a non-judgmental way, and allow them to sort of think outside of their bubble. It was cute. At one point, one of the twins said something, and my 3rd grader, who I will say is a little bit of a social justice warrior, he smiled in the back, and he was like, well, Elliot, I'm not sure that was the point, but we'll talk again in a couple of years. So that... it was amazing. It sums up our experience at Giddens. And I also just want to note that my 3 boys are very unique. And some of their strengths are another one's weakness. And I feel like Giddens sees them all for who they are. And they're all valued for who they are and get what they need. So we're just very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Okay, I'd like to introduce now to Diane Wright, who is our extended day and summer camp director. Diane, welcome.
Hi, I'm so glad to be able to share with you all today. I am the extended day manager, and so I run our after school program, which we call Extended Day, which is fully included in tuition at Giddens. I also run day camps on days that there's no school for midwinter and spring break, and also for some in-service days and conference days. And I run Summer Blast Camp, which is our 8-week summer program at Giddens. And I have had so much fun this year. Starting last year, I started the position last year and we didn't have a full extended day program because of COVID, and mixing kids together wasn't an option at that time. But this year we've been able to have a full extended day program, and it's been amazing hiring a staff and having kids stay at school for a longer day. And in kindergarten, a lot of the kids are just expressing this beautiful excitement to have a connection between school and extended day. A lot of our extended day staff steps into classrooms during the day, do coverages at recess. And so relationships are built during the day that continue afterwards. And just in the last couple weeks, I've been hearing, a kid will get picked up at the end of the school day, and his parent will kind of ask, can they go back in for extended day because they really want to stay? And of course I say, yes, I would love if everyone could stay. And then just last week, or just this week it was actually one of Margaret's kids. So really cute, but but he walked out. Extended day ends at 5:30, and he walks out of extended day getting picked up right in the last pickup window. It's like 5:25. He walks out and he says to his mom, "It's sunset." She starts laughing, and I'm like, what does that mean? And he had really wanted to be picked up by the time it was dark outside because he wanted to stay at school as long as possible. And so he was like, it's not dark yet. Like, I don't want to leave yet. But I assured him that next week it will be dark at 5:30. So, but it just made me feel really happy that kids feel so much comfort and excitement about being at school that they just want to stay. They don't even want to leave.
Thank you so much, Diane. Well, we have time at the end of this program to take any questions you have for us. We would be delighted to answer those questions for you. So I'm going to pass this back to Marva, who will facilitate a Q&A. Marva?
Thanks, Ken. I just want to thank the faculty and the families. I think it's always really amazing to hear how the faculty and the parents, I think, are actually really together in the experiences of the school, right? The faculty are so expert at noticing children and noticing their emotions and also noticing kind of academically where they're at and supporting them. And I think our work with kids is only better when we're in a really strong partnership with the families and we have an understanding, right, with you all and with the parents about who their kid is and where they're challenged and where they're successful and how to support them. It's something about, I think, Ori's story, right, is about us helping kids bridge, right, what sometimes is experienced as a gap between home and school, and what we hope actually the kids are experiencing as their whole selves, right, in both locations, both bringing a bug at a wish home, right, to share and talking about their experience inside of their families with us at school and sharing that experience. So we hope that these moments have just given you a little bit of a window into the texture of what it's like to be a kid at Giddens and what it's like to be a teacher at Giddens and what it's like to be a parent at Giddens. And with that, we'll open it up to questions. We are super happy to answer anything, to address anything, to talk about anything that you'd like to talk about. Feel free to shout out, or if you've asked something in the chat, let me take a quick look. Great. There's a question about how do you handle kids with IEPs? That's a really good question. We actually really appreciate having a sense of where a kid's development is and what's identified in an IEP. And then we really leverage the learning services department, both Sharon and Katie, who is complementary to Sharon's role in literacy in mathematics. They are not the same. And our school counselor, along with Brenda as the associate head, to really think through the accommodations that are laid out in an IEP, and then supporting the teachers, right, when appropriate, to actually implement those accommodations. So we're always interested in talking to parents, both about what's in an IEP, but also how does that show up, right, in a kid's daily experience, whether at home or elsewhere. I don't know if Sharon or Brenda, you want to step in there and respond.
I would just add on to that many students with IEPs also qualify for services through Seattle Public Schools, and so they might have outside resources that we tap into as well as a further support.
Yeah. That's great, and we have a great set of providers outside of our school that we communicate with on a regular basis. If it's a question that we need further understanding with regard to what are the best practices for this particular student, how to best address their needs. If it's a particular situation that we've not seen before, then we'll talk with our outside providers and get what we need to be able to address your students' needs.
Thanks, Brenda, and thanks, Sharon. There's a question in the chat about how do we think about academic standards and excellence in relationship to individual kids as well as other comparable schools. That's great. We are a standards-based school, and we think about standards, but we think about the standards in relationship to the cohort of kids and the individual kids, as you've pointed out right in front of us. Our goal actually is for kids to develop, right, the skills, knowledge, and abilities that they need in all of the content areas as they progress through schooling. And we make assessments related to that, both formally and informally. So the learning services team and all of the teachers actually collaborate, right, around kind of formal assessments, both in mathematics and literacy, as an example. We have a pretty good fine-tuned insight into where every kid is in the school in those areas and how they're progressing, right? And we pay attention to that because we want to know how a kid is progressing over time in each one of those areas related to specific standards. We also leverage standards around anti-bias education as part of the framework that we use to help kids develop skills around anti-bias thinking as part of the work we do. I wonder, Brenda, if you want to talk a little bit more about that and anything related to how you think about that in relationship to the other schools.
Sure. I think that one of the things that we're working on and continually working on is as the standards shift and as we're looking at science and technology and social justice and social emotional learning all being part of Washington state standards now, and part of professional development for teachers to retain licensure. We are committed to staying abreast of the changing climate. As we look at our scope and sequence, or we look at our curriculum maps each year, we're aligning them with standards and assuring that the students are getting what they need at their developmental time that the standard hits, but also saying, hey, you know what? We need to make sure that students are getting what they need if they're above and beyond. And so there's differentiation that's a clear component. As far as relationship to comparable schools, I'm in connection with most of the assistant heads at other schools or directors of teaching and learning, and I think we're all committed to really standards-based instruction. I'm not sure about every school, mind you, but I think we do a lot of communicating with one another to ensure that, how are you addressing a specific standard in social justice and equity? And we'll talk and discuss and come up with what sounds to us like it meets our school at the point where we are, which is pretty far along. So I would feel like Giddens School really pushes the edge with regard to staying abreast of and pushing beyond standards at each, specifically around social justice and equity.
Thanks, Brenda. There's a question about, do you offer any second language curriculum? We do offer Spanish. We start Spanish with kids in preschool. We spread the specialists out. We're running 3 events today for each grade, and the Spanish specialist was part of the early childhood. It's kind of amazing to see kids, as you might know, they can take up language very, very quickly. And then Karina, who is the Spanish teacher, has been a teacher at Giddens for just about 20 years, I believe, and has a whole range of work that she does with kids starting at 3 all the way through 5th grade. Kids definitely leave Giddens with some knowledge and of both speaking Spanish, both knowledge about cultural differences and ways of thinking about different places in the world where Spanish is spoken as the primary language. And they often enter middle school being able to kind of test out a first language skills in Spanish. So that's a pretty strong part of our curriculum. What's the K1 class size and how many classes are there per cohort? The K class size can vary really anywhere between kind of 12 and 18. We're expecting us to kind of stabilize with a K class size of about 14 kids in the next year. And that will be 2 classes of K, we believe, in the next year. And then first and second grade at Giddens are combined as 3 first and second grade classrooms, 3 third and fourth grade classrooms, and then 2 fifth grade classrooms. That should change for us. We just recently changed to Soul kindergarten entry. Again, really seeing this as a developmental moment for kids and taking hold of that as they adjust into classrooms. And then 5th grade also is its own independent moment as kids are leaving and making that developmental step. And so we've made some adjustments. I point that out for 2 reasons. It's important for you to know the structure of the school, but also it's important for you to know that this is a community that steps back every now and then and ask ourselves the question, is this the way we should still be doing things? Is there a way that we might want to make an adjustment or a change? Do we want to explore something and learn about that? And we made that recent transition with the grade levels, and I think that's been super successful. And we'll step back every now and then around a whole bunch of things, right? And ask ourselves that question. There's a question about, can you say more about how the curriculum helps promote kids working through conflict that arises? Portia, I'm wondering if you would talk a little bit about that. And when I see you, you can poke me in the side for calling you out to answer that question.
Thanks, Marva.
Exactly.
It's all good. We actually, in kindergarten, we set the time in the beginning of the year to put that groundwork in social emotional learning, both in that first pillar of the anti-bias curriculum about identity, focusing on one's identity, focusing on one's feelings, and then being able to express those feelings and say what you need. And so, which gets to that second, the second pillar of anti-bias curriculum, which is diversity. And so the kids early in the year build on community, do a lot of community building activities so that they, like I said, get to know each other, get to know each other's wants and needs, and then be able to advocate for themselves if they need to, speak up. And so that's where that conflict resolution pieces come in. Also in kindergarten and even in the school, we have that flexibility to actually stop what we're doing if there is a need for conflict resolution, for class meetings, for coming up with ideas and strategies to solve a problem. And so it's sort of embedded and a priority, I guess I would say, in our classrooms, is that communication and connections and problem solving and advocacy is something that we find that important. So we, it gets talked about, all throughout, all day.
Thanks, Portia. I would just highlight something there, which I think is that supporting kids around conflict resolution isn't about, it's not only about the curriculum you have in place, right? It's about the way that they're supported and assisted with teachers around navigating those moments. And that takes time. And you can hear both in what Portia's saying, what Ori's saying, what other people have said, is that like stepping back and taking the time to work with kids through those moments. Nicole talked about this, right? Is really important in terms of how we support them in building that capacity and that skill. There's a question about what's the role of technology in STEM in the learning experience. Sarah, I wonder if you want to talk a little bit more about Spark, and then we can add in a little around technology, because we have an educational technology person in the school. They're not in this particular group, but we can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So science is a big part of Spark, and 3 of the units of the year are primarily focused on science: earth science, life science, and physical science. We, in the last week, have had, the 5th graders were looking at macroinvertebrates from the soil under a microscope and just screaming with joy and excitement at what they were seeing under there. So science is a huge part of the Spark curriculum, and we tie in technology with that as well. So I meet with our technology specialists once a week and think about how can we use different technology tools to support the learning that students are doing in Spark. I think we often think a little bit more about STEAM and the connections between science and art, and how being a scientist and being an artist actually have a lot of connections. And even if a unit is not specifically about science, we still might be integrating, well, we will be integrating scientific concepts and thinking about, design thinking in any unit that we're doing. I hope that starts to answer your question.
Thanks, Sarah. I think those are great examples, and the highlight there is that we think of that work as really interdisciplinary work, because what we know actually is that as the kids move through schooling, but also as they become adults in the world, much of the thinking, right, and the work that they need to do is the mixture of things like science and mathematics. And in our context, right, that also includes principles around justice, right? And that's a really important element of the way that we think about what's traditionally framed as STEM or STEAM work. We've really captured in kind of the Spark program in a little bit of a different way. I'll just highlight momentarily, coming out of COVID, right? We've learned quite a bit about technology in the last few years. Every school has made huge strides in kind of usage and thinking about technology. Our goal for kids around technology is that they both understand how to use it and how to learn through technology, and that they have kind of an ethical sensibility about how to engage in the world from that perspective. So Corey, who's our ed tech integrationist, and that's a new position for us this year, he's been a classroom teacher at Giddens, is really supporting all the teachers in thinking about what is the role of technology, when is it useful, when is it supportive of learning, right? And how do kids leverage that in ways that are really productive.
I'm just looking at the time, and I apologize, but we're gonna have to close out the Q&A portion of this event. And Marva, did you have anything you wanted to say?
I don't. I'm happy to stay on just for a short moment if people have individual questions they want to ask, and I'm happy to answer those. I just want to really appreciate the faculty and the families and all of you who showed up today. Our goal is just to give you a window into the school. We trust that you'll make great decisions for your family and your kids. We're always happy to answer questions and help you see kind of what's unique about Giddens, and we hope that it's a great spot and a place that you're continuing to think about. So thank you for joining. I'll stay on if people have individual questions they want to ask.
And I'll just add that if you haven't already joined us for an in-person tour of the school, I would encourage you to register through Ravenna Admit, which is our online application system. We would be delighted to welcome you in person and see you. And if you haven't yet started an application, we hope that you will consider doing so for our school as you are searching for a great school community where your child can grow and thrive. And of course, if you have questions along the way through this process, please don't ever hesitate to reach out. As Marva mentioned, she'll stay on if people have additional questions, but for everyone else, thank you so much and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Ken, there's a quick hand up if you have time for that. I see a hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. I would stay on and ask a question if Marva or someone could talk for a minute. So it's kind of an honest, a vulnerable question. I mean, I love hearing about all the small moments that people shared in school, and I wanted to say that. So thanks, and I wanted to say that I love all the thinking about social justice and like having critical conversations about that. And I think as parents, we're kind of struggling a little bit without thinking about how to support the public school system. Yeah. And either through engagement and enrollment, obviously, and in our community. And I'm just wondering how, I know you can't answer this question for us, but like, how do you think about and teach about like the relationship of Giddens students with other students in the broader community, especially in the South End of Seattle? And I'd love to hear some thoughts about that.
I love this question. This is a question that is actually asked a lot. And I think what's important about it, there are a lot of things that are really important about it. The fact that it is a question that parents at Giddens ask a lot, it tells you something about the community itself, right? It is a community that I think is struggling with something that's really important, which is how to support the public good right? How to support the public, and knowing actually that education is fundamental to democracy, right? And how do I think about supporting my own child, right? And helping them be in a place that I think they're really going to thrive. And sometimes those things match up, right? Depending on your kid, depending on the context that you're in, depending on the schools that you have access to. And sometimes they don't. And that's a real tension that I think a lot of both the individual faculty, it is a tension that I feel as a person who has spent a long lifetime of being very committed to public education in a variety of ways, and have really thought about. I also think what's really valued in the school is that if you were to come to Giddens, there would be other families that you would talk with that are also struggling with that same thing. So it wouldn't be as such as like, oh, this doesn't matter, or I'm really now just this independent school family and I'm not thinking about educational issues in the broad sense, right? Or I'm not thinking about educational issues specifically, right, to the South End. And I think that's really important. I don't think, as families are starting to transition to middle school, there are a lot of families. This year is actually more so, there are more families applying to public middle school, right, coming out of Giddens than independent school. And what's great about that is it refreshes the conversation for every individual family about what's right for them, what's right for their kid, which is sometimes different than what's right for them, right? And then how do they think about that in the community? I think the school, just to be really honest, we've often had very strong relationships to community organizations in the neighborhood around us. If you don't know this, we moved basically right before COVID hit. So we moved in December of 2019. We have, because of COVID, we've not really yet established the community bonds that we had when we were in the old neighborhood, right? And so we have some work to do there. And I think it's always worth thinking about our relationships to the public schools around us, and also the institutions that are focused on early childhood education, which are not viewed in the public school system, but are actually really important elements to the context we're in. And I think we have some work to do there. Our slowness there has a lot to do with just how COVID has just kind of shut everything down in those moments. So again, I appreciate this question. It's a really important question. It is a question that lots of families and lots of teachers and myself, like I said, included, we just grapple with that. And I do think we think about what's our relationship to the public good, right? And how do we support those notions? So I don't have an answer or a resolution.
Marva, can I add something as a parent?
That's great, Portia. Thank you.
So I'm also a parent of a child at Giddens, and I know for my child, like Giddens provides financial aid to like a big percentage of our students and our families. And so my child, who typically probably would be in a public school because we wouldn't be able to afford an independent school enrollment, it's surrounded with a diverse group of kids. And so, talking as a parent, she's not just with rich kids, who she can't find connections with or have the same kind of, she's surrounded by a diverse group of kids who have and is going through probably similar situations as her parents are. And so even though, like I said, this is me coming from a parent, we're in a private school and independent school, my child still feels like she's in a school, that feels like it's a community. Some, kids that she finds connections and relationships with. And that's so different from her.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Yep, thank you. Thanks, Andrew, for asking. Anything else that people want to ask about? Thanks, Portia. Thanks for jumping in. Thanks, Hiromi.
I just wanted to say also to echo that, and that's an amazing question because I question that also like every year. And as a parent, I thought about the importance of my child having a great attention, because being in a classroom with 14 kids or even smaller, I feel in this time of age, it's so important it's just so important for their social emotional and their feelings, compared to, I went to a public school and I loved it, but I felt as an experience, I didn't have a lot of that. I didn't have a lot of that social and emotional feelings. Like I just had to go home and deal with it, or go home to school and not talk about it. Here, my child talks about it. The teacher talks about it. People that picks him, people that is there presenting at the door when we drop off and when we pick up. It's so the representation of the people are there. And I feel like that's why I chose this independent school, because of giving each child credit, having attention from the faculty, from parents also, means a lot to us, because that right there is growing and builds character in your child. And I support public school also, but for my child, they need the attention that they do deserve, with parents that go to work full time, to be a provider. Because, you know, as a parent, you want to be a provider as well and be there for them every day. But we choose to go to Giddens because of that. We have that great attention for them. Thank you.
Thanks, Rita. I mean, I think we would wish, right, that every public school, right, had the resources, right, that Giddens has and the ways that it can operate. I think that's the conflict, that's the dilemma. I do think an important element of the school, I think it's harder in an independent school that doesn't really have the depth of work around justice, because the justice frame, I think, helps you and helps the kids understand their place in the world at large in ways that are purposeful and meaningful, right? And an independent school that is signaling that but isn't really grounded in that, I think, is a different kind of dilemma, right?
Yeah, it's really isolating, I think. Yeah.
So I think that's a thing to think about and to contemplate. And you will not be alone, right? You can see that you are not alone right now, right? And trying to think through that. And it doesn't relieve us of responsibility, right? To think through that. So anything else people would like to know, or questions people have? Oh, let me see. Yeah, sorry that I missed that. What is the policy around travel? Help the child keep up with lessons while learning. This is a non-COVID related travel question, right? Every travel question I get is a COVID related travel question. So
this one definitely predates COVID.
Yeah, great. I think our goal is to be supportive of families and of kids, right, related to travel. I think a lot of what that requires is advanced notice and planning, right? We do better, like you do and like your kid does, right, with advanced notice and planning. So if there's a upcoming trip and you know your kid's going to be out of school, right, it's a fair ask, right, to say, what are the kinds of things we can do at a distance, right? And what kind of materials do we need, right? And think through that. I think that's a fair ask. I think where we get stuck sometimes is a last minute, like, we're traveling to Hawaii, can you by tomorrow have all these things together for my kid, right? And then, you know, part of my job as the head of school is to say, no, actually, I'm really sorry. I really appreciate that. And that's not a thing I'm going to ask, or that the teachers are going to do. So a lot of that is coordination with you. If you are a family that travels, you know, extensively, as some parents do, I think that's coordination with us in advance, so that we understand what that sounds and looks like.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And it's good to know that with enough advance notice that it's something that could be supported. Yeah. We really like learning about other cultures being a core part of the learning experience. And so we also, at least pre-COVID, had, you know, a fair bit of like travel. So we didn't want to be separated from our kiddos as much. So that it's just something that when it comes up, we wanted to know how that would be handled. So that's appreciated. Thank you.
I think, like most answers at Giddens, we will be in conversation with you about it, right? And try to work out what works for you, right? And also what makes sense, right, in relationship to the rest of the class and the teachers, right? And engage. We will engage, right? We won't just say, here's the rule and this is what it looks like and it's this or that. We'll engage and try to understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and that we know that you'll try to understand what it is we're trying to accomplish, right? And it will be a conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. I'm so relieved that it wasn't a COVID policy travel related question. So I will answer anything related to COVID, but I will definitely fully answer anything else that is not related to COVID given the last 2 years. So anything else that people want to ask real quickly? Right now, if you are, well, this is changing. So if your kid will be vaccinated, right, a vaccinated kid, you can travel and there's no quarantine policy on the return, right? Just like an adult, essentially. If that were to change based on CDC policy for some reason, we would adjust and think through that again. But right now, what I view, right, is what we see is that kids who are vaccinated, age 5 through 16, like most of my family, they'll be able to travel and not quarantine upon return. We're running a vaccine clinic on Wednesday at school. Our goal is to help everybody become vaccinated and continue to really mitigate the risk of COVID in the context